Hi everyone, hope you've had a good week. So in today's session, or this month, we're going to be looking at insects, starting off with the bumblebee. So I have put this image up for you guys to download. Obviously, if you wanted to do a different bumblebee to this one, that's fine. I've also got this one, which is quite interesting, called the Dadant bee, slightly different wingspan and different body. Or if you wanted to have a go at drawing a wasp as well, the similar techniques and processes will apply. So for this one, I'm actually going to start off by drawing the outside shape of the body, and then I'm going to talk you through how to add in the details and so on. So I'm thinking it probably will take you a good hour to get all the details of this bee. So if you wanted to challenge yourselves and do an extra one, then you could do that as well, okay? So I'm going to start off by just starting with this kind of loose shape here. I'm kind of doing it to one side, so if I do want to add something else, I can. But if you just wanted to have this slap bang in the middle of your page, then that's also okay. And see this sort of slightly waist area here. And then that big bottom for the bumblebee. This is all very loose. Like I can actually see that this probably needs to come down a bit. So that shaping is really important, and I can see that because there's almost like a sort of triangular shape here, and then that kind of comes up like that. And then the legs, so they're just coming out. Now the legs as well, if you notice that each bit it kind of pinches, so it goes to a smaller gap and then it gets bigger. So, you know, this kind of effect, and then kind of gets a little bit smaller. Like that. And then on this side, again, just kind of coming up behind the wing. So everything's quite loose. I'm not doing it too hard with my pencil. This just means that I can rub it out if I go wrong. So it should be kind of a loose quality to the image. There's a little bit of work on that, but I'm just going to come back to that. I just want to make the rest of the body and shape of the wings and stuff in the right place. So the wings are actually coming in. They're not coming from here. They're sort of starting from inside. So it's kind of big teardrops shape. There's another little bit here. And then we've got that suggestion sort of behind the wing of the foot. The same. So you can, use, like we've done before, other parts of the body as like a rough guide, and that's roughly about the same length. So as long as you don't go past that, then that should be okay. So by putting a marker line in, you can just kind of make sure that that's where it should be. I'm just going to slightly change the shape of that bottom wing. And again, we can kind of see the foot and the leg coming through. That's all that angle. Okay, so once you're kind of happy with the loose shape of the bee, then you can start to think about some of the highlights or areas which are lighter. So, for example, here, there's an area where it's lighter, and I'm just going to kind of loosely suggest that there. Here, Actually, let's just get these neatened up a little bit. So that's what I mean by that, is I'm just getting rid of the lines that I don't need. So yeah, it's kind of white there. It's kind of darker. So I'm just going to do it actually with just the pencil. So notice with the pencil, what we want to do is we want to create texture and detail. So by doing that, we're actually creating lots of little dashes like this for the fur of the bee. Like these bumblebees in particular are very fluffy. So we want to show that. And we're just using pencil. Now, the reason we're using pencil is, again, it's just taking away that worry, I guess, for colour. And it's just focusing everything on just the details, things that we can see. So again, I'm just going to loosely put this in. So I'm just going to rub out that line that I've got there. I'm just going to loosely do that on the top here. So I know, for example, that the yellow is obviously much darker than the black. So you need to get into the habit of going, right, dark tone, which is going to be the black in this case, is really hard. So it means I actually have to press my pencil down a lot harder. Mid-tone, I'm taking the pressure off. Light tone is taking the pressure off again. So I'm working with a HB pencil. You could, if you have access to a darker pencil, you could obviously use, you know, a 2B, a 4B pencil and work that over the top. So I'm just going to literally layer this effect. And I know that this area is dark, so I can be quite confident with my marks there. So I'm just bringing this down, and then notice that I'm sort of, it's spreading out from that point. So as I'm coming round, I'm making sure that the movement of the pencil is working around in the direction of this kind of point here. And that's all going to help. I can go back over these marks and I can make that darker and thicker, which is fine. But it's important to kind of work with that premise of that idea of it coming out, and that's creating lots of lovely texture for the bumblebee. Right, so with the wings, even on that area, there's lots of detail. So I'm just going to slightly rub a little bit away, because I can see here that there's this kind of edging. So I'm just going to slightly allude to that. Again, in the direction of how I'm holding the pencil. I know this area is quite dark, so I can kind of work again quite confidently with that. It's just making sure that when you've got to these bits, it's a little bit lighter. So it's all about pressure points with your pencil and developing that. And then this angle, so I just want to take that up a little bit. And then it's a bit lighter, if you notice. So this is where you can do a thing where you're just, you know, very lightly sort of coming down initially. And then putting in some darker lines and areas. And then really working into the top area here. I'll just show you the difference of if I use a darker pencil. So I'll just get one out of my drawer, because you'll notice, so this is like a 2B pencil here. You'll notice quite a big difference with, it kind of takes away that need for putting as much pressure on, and it gets things, because the graphite's a little bit softer, so that the further you go up with the weight, so for example up to like a 4 or 5, then the graphite becomes more and more soft, and it's much easier then to transition onto the paper. And you can use the HB. If you haven't got a 2B, you know, don't panic. It doesn't mean that you can't do this drawing. You know, you can definitely do this drawing with just a HB pencil. The flexibility, I guess, that the 2B and not to be sorry, I could not get that one not in there. The extra ability there to kind of have the other B pencils just allows you that little bit of flexibility and kind of, if anything, just to take that pressure off your hand a little bit. So, you know, I sort of said to you guys before, with modern day drawing techniques, there's been a lot more development with kind of, you know, thinking about using indentation tools, and what that will do is, you know, things like where we've got some of these bits here, you could, because you've dented the paper with those marks, you can then go over and it creates this effect there. I haven't suggested that we use those because that's like another expense on for you guys, but that if that is something that you are interested in, then obviously you know, we could either look to collectively doing that as a group, or you could individually kind of investigate that a little bit further. And then as we come further down, again, we've got a little bit of an overlap and it's kind of a wobbly line. So I'd start off lighter, and then we can always add. It's much harder to take away when we press this hard. So you can just start off doing this technique, just going very lightly. And it's almost like a band. So actually, if we do some sort of shape, it just helps. And then sort of centrally, there's like a darker line sort of coming through. So again, even with that yellow area, there is tone in there. So that's where, so we know that the top of it has to be a bit darker because that's black. So, and you almost want like a little white gap to sort of leave a very, lighter line. And then we want to take the pressure off to create this mid-tone. Which, as it sort of comes down, it gets a bit lighter and lighter. So you can sort of almost kind of work with these lines over the top of each other. And there's little kind of white spots almost and further bottom. So this middle bit is really dark. So again, I can be quite quick with that one. The point is that you can see that it's taking me quite a while just to do one section of the bee. I'm not kind of rushing that with, obviously I'm explaining to you at the same time, but I'm not rushing that process of getting the colour or the tone on there, so to speak. Every little bit that I'm doing is taking some time with the adjustments and so on. So I need to get my pencil a bit sharper because that is starting to get a bit blunt. So I'm just going to sharpen that really quickly to a nice point. So some things about bumblebees, or bees in general actually, there's over 20,000 different species in the world, which is pretty mental. That's quite a lot of bees. So this point is just letting me to get a more refined sort of edge and feel for the fluff on his back. The other thing I thought was quite interesting is only female bees sting. So it's not male bees. We had this amazing lady when I was doing, so I've run 2 Save the Bee courses previously, as in actual classes back in the day when that was allowed to happen. One in Bristol and one in Wales. And the one in Bristol, we had this lady come who's actually a beekeeper, and she gave us some really interesting facts about bees, and actually how the male bees do a lot of the actual work with getting the honey and so on. The other thing I thought was interesting was bees see all colours apart from the colour red. So obviously they use their antennae and their sense of smell to help them navigate to the different plants. And these bumblebees are very sociable, so they live in large families, whereas you can get some bees, such as solitary bees, which will just quite happily live on their own in a little kind of bamboo house or something like that, a little hole somewhere. It's pretty amazing, nature. So what I'm doing here is it's going to be hard to leave those like white gaps. So I'm actually going to do some bits which are darker, almost like a checkered board effect, and then leave those bits in the middle lighter, and that will kind of give that effect then. So I'm just going back over and working in that so it gets a bit more, gives it a bit more contrast. So that's the other thing to point out as well, is like once you've done one layer, like with everything that we do, I'm always saying to build up the layers. So again, I'm doing that technique where I'm just going to sort of gone over it, but I'm going to just do some bits which are like the darker spots in between. And by doing these little kind of mark making techniques, again, you're giving the bee that texture to it. I mean, if you've got a smaller rubber as well, like a rubber at the end of your pencil, that's really useful because it has like a fine line to it. The other thing you can do is with a Stanley knife, you can slice the rubber to get like an edge to it, which makes it easier to, rub out more defined areas. But obviously, if you are going to do that, then do be very careful. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that as a suggestion of like pattern and, just some extra texture at the bottom there. So then this bit as well, so that we know that this bottom bit is the lightest bit of all. Let's just bring down some of these areas. So I'm just going back over and making that black line a bit more defined and kind of ribbed almost at the top. So pressing a bit harder. And then again, just starting off very lightly. So I'm just going to rub out that bit first of all. And then just put in some suggestions very lightly, because if you work too hard on this, then that's going to lose the idea that this is lighter. And then coming up to the top, back up to the top here, so I've sort of left that. We've got this element, which is again like this colour, that mid-tone. So again, we can use that to kind of help guide us. And get the shaping a bit better up top here. So I'm just going to take this very lightly now up to you, because you can kind of see there's representation. So some of these bits, some of these black bits need to be a bit darker, going right to that top line almost. So I'm pressing quite hard in a quite wispy manner there. And then you've got his little top of his head popping out here. Again, just leaving a little bit white there. And then the wings, so I'm going to come back to the feet and the antennae in a second. So the wings, got this very defined line on the outside. So what that means is I can make that very defined. And I can see that there's like a sort of little bit coming down there. So then the next bits I would say just do quite lightly. So we can make sure they're in the right place. So even that line could sort of, that's gone down a bit too far. So it sort of curves. Like so. And then, you know, I can do that much darker. Now, another top tip here is I'm obviously going slightly over some of the body of what I've done. So you can always use, let's just hold that one. You can always use another scrap piece of paper just to rest your hand on. So what that means is you don't end up with a really dark sort of smudged line on your hand. So here I can see it's quite dark, but there's lots of light areas on here as well because the wings are very fragile. They're sort of glistening. So I kind of want to show that happening. So just a little bit of almost like gradient happening here. And I'm just almost leaving some bits just white. And in between these bits, if you just leave in between the lines white, then that's what's really going to help pick up this idea of it being lighter. So again, on that bit, I'm just going to do this bit a little bit darker. That's his leg sort of coming through. I'm just using my other hand just to really guide me with those different movements. And that is important. You know, I know I do constantly say this to you, but if you just keep your head down at your own drawing and don't look up at the image in front